We haven't even brought this up yet in the first couple of segments, and I guess that's on me. That's on us. We should have said it should have been the first word of the broadcast today. Raccoon.
Oh.
Yeah. We'll talk with Connor O'Gara about some football in a moment, but I know he knows what's happened at Baum Walker last Friday because everybody across the country knows about the most famous raccoon, I think, in the United States right now.
Who's more famous, the guy that picked up the raccoon or the guy in the white shirt that fell down.
That was
trying to get away from.
That was the guy's mother, by the way, that fell down.
Oh, that was a guy. Oh, I'm sorry.
I would never be able to reach down and pick up a potentially rabid animal inside a baseball park, especially one that's as big as a dog. Connor, if you saw a raccoon that big next to you at any event at all, what's your reaction?
Complete and total terror. I'm not going to try and play the tough guy here. If I saw a raccoon that close to me, you're going to see that's when I want to be tested for the 40-yard dash for my NFL combine training, is running away from that raccoon. I would not have been the person to have picked up that thing and to have shown it off to the masses. Now, look, I'm saying this while also at the same time, I'm going to give you a take that I'm sure you have not had yet. I kind of looked at that raccoon in that spot, as terrifying as they are. I kind of felt bad for it, that's not what you want to be known for in the grand scheme of life. It was probably just a lost raccoon looking for a place to go, maybe wanted to just watch some good baseball, do what many people are doing on a Friday night, and just had a moment, a lapse in judgment where they just thought, you know what, I've lost my sense of surroundings here, and this is a problem, and now there's no way for me to get out of this. Everybody's been in a situation like this. That raccoon just had to go viral in order to kind of see what the other side was like.
Well, I think the idea of having lucky animals that show up in a ballpark are dead now because there was a snake that showed up in the dugout before Saturday's game, and that didn't necessarily bring any luck, so we just don't have any more of that kind of stuff going on right now. No animals for good luck. I know everybody wants another rally possum, but you just don't have it right now.
You can't force it. It's got to come organically. If you're trying to force a lucky animal, I mean, we don't need to go down the road of Joe Boo from Major League here with the chicken and the authenticity of that decision of talking about needing to get him a live chicken before the game. But look, I think that you've got to be able to create rallies in any way you can. But bringing an animal in there and saying that's your designated role, to me, that's a bit much. Let's have the random moments on camera where we're able to kind of capture a unique animal. Maybe it's a woodpecker, hanging out by some area of the ballpark that just will not leave, or it's a woodpecker that's hanging on the foul pole. That to me, I think something like that makes a little bit more sense as opposed to bringing in a caged animal or something like that, hoping that they're going to do all their work for you.
Well, we have a caged animal show up at Razorback games anyway sometimes, but he's paid to do it. All right, let's get into this potential change in SEC scheduling, and the ACC's already kind of seems near the end of their road of changing their schedule format into a pod-oriented system, and it feels to me like it would be a foregone conclusion that the SEC might do that too, but you're not really convinced that that's the case. And it's this interesting thing that you try to do when you're mixing the schedule up in ways that it hasn't been done before, because you're trying to continue rivalries that mean something. You're trying to figure out a way to have maybe a better championship game that isn't based upon division champions, and at the same time make everybody feel like you're actually in a league, which is difficult to do when you got 16 teams coming in.
There needs to be change, and the SEC won't be in a position where it can just copy the ACC's model. Why? Because the ACC is going to have 14 teams and the SEC is going to have 16, right? That's the basic layout of it will be different in some way, shape, or form. And what we're still trying to figure out with the SEC, and what has always taken precedent, is how many conference games do you want? That's kind of the lost in the shuffle thing with all of this, and why even if you do pods, there are certain scenarios that only work for a 9-game conference schedule. That there's been a lot of resistance to that in the SEC, and having this path to the playoff and what that creates. So that's part of it. To me, and this is an unpopular opinion, I would take it a step further, and I would only have one permanent game. I would say I don't need the pods. Just give me that one permanent rivalry, and then you have the 7 rotating home and home. So what would that mean? that would essentially mean that you would have you would still have your Iron Bowls, your Egg Bowls, of course. You would still have your world's largest outdoor cocktail party. You would still have these great games, but you would lose like an Alabama, LSU, or something like that. You wouldn't necessarily get on a yearly basis Arkansas and Mississippi State. So you would instead have, though, a chance to play every team in the SEC during a 4-year stretch. So you're at least going to every single venue in a 4-year stretch, because that's the way it should be. The way that it's set up right now is ridiculous. Think about this, you guys. Texas A&M joined the SEC in 2012. The first time that Georgia's going to College Station is 2024. Yeah. Like, what's the point of being in the same conference? Mm-hmm. That doesn't make any sort of sense to me. So I know that it would take away some of those rivalries, and maybe you wouldn't necessarily have all these permanent games. But at the same time, I still look at that and I say, man, that would be such an improvement, because I want to see more of these teams play each other. It's weird to see like Alabama and Florida go like 6 years without playing each other if they don't see each other in the SEC championship. Like, I think we need to see these games on a more frequent basis, and that's a better sell for fans. It's a better sell for the TV package moving forward.
To take that a little bit farther, Connor, I mean, do you think that it would just be better just to get rid of non-conference games? I mean, we're entering this stage of football where in the next decade, most conferences are going to be at 16, and during our lifetime, we'll probably see a conference get up to 20 teams in college football. Should we just go ahead and get rid of non-conference games? I mean, even some of your rivalries. I mean, do we really need, a Clemson, South Carolina? Do we really need Florida, Florida State? What purpose does non-con actually play in today's college football when you have these mega large conferences?
No, I disagree with that. We're still going to have non-conference games. There are way too many of those rivalries which have big implications, even from a political standpoint, where they would make sure that those games are played. Like, go back to 2020, what a big deal that was to have some of these non-conference games that have been played for decades to be taken off completely. I think we're still going to see a scenario in which non-conference games are played. The question is just how many of them are there going to be, because that still has implications in terms of what conference strength means for the college football playoff, and then being able to sell some of these non-conference games for TV packages, for season ticket holders, all these different things. Like, it still matters for that. What's also interesting that's kind of lost in the shuffle of this is, like, teams like Georgia and Florida have really loaded up their non-conference schedules. If you look in the latter part of the 2020s, that sort of dependence on them sticking with an 8-game conference schedule. I mean, there's one year where I think Georgia has like 4 Power 5 non-conference games on the schedule, like where it is loaded up. And so now, are we going to potentially have to cancel some of these games if we do have a system in which there is 9 conference games? I know Nick Saban has said, I'd rather have 10 conference games to be able to do that. I'm all for any scenario in which there are more Power 5 games on the schedule. I think there are just going to be a lot of difference of opinions with that when that decision for the scheduling model finally comes out.
Mm-hmm. And it's been a crazy couple of weeks. It feels like every other day something new is coming out with the NCAA and how college football is going to run. And I think that we're going to get a lot more of these things that come out over the rest of this off season. What's something that we haven't really heard or talked about that you think is going to make the news here in the next couple months as we're entering the real heart of prediction season and pre-college football?
I think we're going to get some sort of a resolution on when Texas and Oklahoma are actually going to come to the SEC. I think that's kind of next. That's going to be the big headline, because Brett McMurphy reported that Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati were negotiating that buyout to come to the Big 12 next year with somewhere between $17 and $20 million. And then what could that mean for the future of the Big 12? Are we going to see a buyout in the $100 million range for Texas and Oklahoma to leave the Big 12 early? Or are we perhaps going to see them actually have to ride this thing out and have this 2 years of weird scheduling in the Big 12 where they don't come to the SEC? Because I don't think that the SEC has that urgency. They know that Oklahoma and Texas are coming. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. And I think if the 14 playoff stays intact, the SEC kind of lacks motivation to add those 2 teams early on. So I think we're going to need to see some sort of a resolution on this probably in the next few months as that gets negotiated, and we're going to see kind of the future of what we think the conference is going to look like.
Yeah, I guess for some people out there, it'd be a sad story with Texas joining the SEC, that once they do, that's bye-bye Longhorn Network. Did you ever actually watch it? I know personally, I think I may have turned it on twice in 10 years.
I can say that I watched clips that came out from the Longhorn Network, like the clip wherein Tom Herman decided to act like an adult and give the double birds to the cameras and didn't realize like what live television was when he did that on signing day. So I've seen footage from the Longhorn Network, and look, like in theory, there are a lot of things that were that made sense at the time with the Longhorn Network. It's so easy to look back on the decade that was, with how bad Texas has been, that makes us say, wow, that was really dumb. And the bridges they kind of burned with A&M and the way that it played out with the rest of the Big 12, that we would say, look, that was really dumb. But at the same time, I actually kind of get some of the logic behind it. It was just more, it would have been a much more successful network if Texas had actually been able to be nationally relevant for the last decade. But unfortunately for Longhorn fans, they were anything but that.
It would also have made more sense if it came out as a streaming platform, which is what a lot of other schools do now, but nobody was doing that back then. Like, 11 years ago, I wasn't streaming Netflix very much, and certainly no universities were putting out like a Hogs Plus or an OSU Max or any of that kind of stuff. I mean, that's the direction that everything's gone in, and that's essentially what the Longhorn Network was at first.
I mean, think about this from the Big 12 standpoint, too, of how desperate you are to keep them on board. You're like, oh, man, you guys could leave? You guys could leave? We'll do anything to make you stay. I mean, think about that situation if you're listening to this and you've ever been in a relationship and your boyfriend or girlfriend is like, hey, I'm going to leave you if you don't do X, Y, and Z to be able to kind of clean things up in your life. You're like, oh, I'll do anything. And you roll out the red carpet and you're like, I'll make any sort of change or whatsoever. That's essentially what the Big 12 did to Texas. I mean, that is why Texas ultimately stayed on board and why they felt like they ran the conference, because they did. And the Big 12 told them that. And they gave them that sort of special treatment. They just didn't have necessarily the foresight to be able to look into the crystal ball and see the way that it was heading with streaming and all those different platforms and the better way to probably monetize it. I mean, the best way to monetize it would have just been showing replays of the 2005 Rose Bowl with Vince Young and USC. Just show that on loop, and I guarantee you that probably would have gotten more traction than live programming of Texas athletics.
Yeah, instead, it became a punchline, which I think everybody here enjoyed. Hey, Connor, we'll let you go with that. Appreciate you, man. It's always good talking with you. Have a good week.
Absolutely. You too, guys.
Appreciate it, Connor.
Connor O'Gara from Saturday Down South. Give him a follow on Twitter at CJ O'Gara. Just think about that, Drew. It's like if all you would have to say to a sports fan if you're having a conversation about sports media or what you watch on television when it comes to sports, you just look at them and say, Longhorn Network, you get an immediate laugh, don't you?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's a joke of a network. I think I turned it on twice in 10 years, and I cannot tell you if I lasted 10 minutes each time. I mean, there's no point of it. If you're not good in anything other than swimming, what's the point of having your own network?
Well, it was the point that might have driven them out of the Big 12.
Partners at BetOnline continue to be the #1 source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including updated odds on the NBA playoffs, fights, and even next season's futures. And don't forget that the MLB is back as well. Who are you picking to win the World Series? BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino and poker games. It's super easy to get started, so head to the website today or use your mobile device to join and use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.